What's going on, everybody? Welcome into the Monday, January 6th, 2025 edition of the Daily Energy Newsbeat Stand-Up. We made it to another year, folks. We are so glad to have you. As always, I am joined by Stuart Turley. I am Michael Tanner. Holy smokes, Stu, we made it. I feel like I've been off for 2 months now. It's like...
the news cycle has been just nuts. I want to give a shout out to our team for putting together the numbers for last year. Michael, congratulations. You had a heck of a year on this podcast. It was nuts.
We had a really crazy year. If you guys are interested in partnering up with us and want to take a look at our media kit, feel free to reach out to us via the email listed below. But man, it was a great 2024, and we have awesome things planned for 2025. But without further ado, Stu, let's go ahead and dive on in. First article, here's kind of a rundown for the show. German purchases of Russian uranium surge. Ooh, yikes. German MP calls for NordStream to be reactivated. Seems 3 years too late on that one. Political consequences of Ukraine's decision to cut off Russian gas to Europe. Biden then poised to announce offshore drilling ban to appease Green lobby. Yeah, that'll last a whole 12 days on that one. Next up, New York's fracking ban ignores $1 trillion in gas reserves while green hysteria stifles the state economy. Stu will then toss the room. I will quickly cover what's happened in the oil and gas markets, mainly this kind of last 2-week boom in oil prices, which has been awesome. We'll cover signs of optimism in the oil markets as the new year begins, trickle in a little bit of our 2025 predictions, and then we'll finish up with natural gas pipeline capacity ramping up in Texas. This is a key one if you're an operator out there specifically working in the Permian Basin. Like I said, as always, I am Michael Tanner, joined by Stuart Turley. Where do we want to begin?
Let's start with our buddies over there in Germany. You and I have had a laugh with Chancellor Scholz.
I see nothing.
He has begged for... Here, let me start with this. You go green energy policies, you go fiscally broke, regimes change if you don't get low-cost natural gas back in. German purchases of Russian uranium surge. The side note to this, Michael, is Germany shut down all of their nuclear reactors and they have not filed to turn them back on yet, but they're already buying uranium. What happens when people don't have low-cost energy? Regimes change. Germany dramatically increased its uranium imports in 2024, bringing in 68.8 tons, a 70% jump in increase. Considering their reactors are shut down, do you see them applying to get them turned back on here pretty quick?
Well, they're gonna need to, because if you're talking about the whole critical mineral space, and we'll talk a little bit more in the transition about some critical mineral stuff that we're dropping on our Substack as a little bit of a tease there. But if you're going to move to a nuclear era, if that's what needs to happen, this stuff is critical. And if all of a sudden now you go from, oh, well, we can't import natural gas from Russia. Oh, but now we need to increase uranium. It's like, well, it's the same thing. There's no difference.
So anyway, I got really tickled. And when I had talked about this before, let's go to the next story, Michael. German MP, the minister, calls for Nord Stream to be reactivated. This is following last week's rumors that from the Slavic president, Michael, said, oh, by the way, this is being set up for a U.S. company to buy the Nord Stream. For our listeners that don't know what Nord Stream is from Russia to Germany under the Baltic Sea that President Biden alluded to him making sure that it would not be in service. Now there is one of those pipelines still capable. I have talked to George McMillan about this, and Germany is really needing low-cost Russian natural gas in order to survive. They have been deindustrialized. They've lost BASF, their fertilizer plant. They've shut down their steel mills. They have shut down several VW. They have lost all this stuff. They are on the borderline of total collapse. Ukraine drives the energy price up further by stopping the transit of Russian natural gas pipeline in Europe. Dahlgren wrote X on Thursday, complaining the German government and the EU are happily watching the destruction of the European industry due to high energy prices. Michael, this also brings up the interview that I did with George. We are seeing the potential destruction of NATO and the EU coming around out of this. This is huge.
This is huge. And my question to you is, how does NordStream fit in with the negotiations that are going to happen starting January 21st with the new administration? Where does NordStream fit in with all that?
Outstanding question, Michael. President Trump is sitting back over here going, the whole reason Biden and his interfering three-letter agencies that I don't want to mention because it gets us thrown off of certain things, they've been interfering with governments and elections. George McMillan has brought this great point out. If President Trump allows the purchase of a U.S. to end let's say the war is ended, Germany can buy that existing pipeline that is still there and they can turn it on immediately. They can get cheap Russian natural gas, but President Trump then would control how fast the other ones come on. So it's still a geopolitical control issue that is at play. Holy smokes, Batman. And when you have President Trump saying, I want you to buy LNG from me, or I'm going to tariff everything out of the EU. Holy smokes, this is a gigantic discussion.
And I love that. But do we have enough LNG export capacity to meet that demand? That's what I think is interesting. And not to gear us off top, but everybody keeps asking me, oh, drill, baby, drill. What's Trump going to do to oil prices? Well, in my opinion, and we'll get into a little bit of the sign of optimism for the oil business, but drill, baby, drill is code for deregulation. And deregulation really has more to do with pipelines and LNG export terminals than it does with drilling. We'll get into a little bit more at Sign of Optimism. Yep. Let's move to the next one, Stu. What do we have here on sticking in Ukraine, I guess?
Oh, yeah. I love Andrew on this one. Andrew Kolbachev is a PhD out of Russia, and he sent me this article, and he is a good dude. Russia and the EU will manage their latest phase of their U.S. instigated divorce without much difficulty, but the U.S. might offer to bring them back together, authorizing this vassal's import of Russian pipeline in exchange for some concessions from the Kremlin in the energy sector and Ukraine. This guy is a PhD in Russia, and he validates what you and I just were talking about the potential. President Trump has the potential of having his finger on the EU energy. I did not have this on my crystal ball, and it's validated in this article.
Yeah, there's so much political chicanery that's going on within this conflict we're seeing in the war between Russia and Ukraine that it really makes my head spin. I don't know anything about it. I've really been enjoying your series with George McMillan, trying to kind of piece and weave together what's going on.
And when I'm recording with him, I'm recording, and what takes 2 hours for us to record or another hour for me to prepare to record, the interview goes by in 5 minutes. So here is where I'm going to give a shout out for our Substack. I'm about to go to the next article. But if you want to go back and really dive into those and watch those repeatedly, you're going to need to be a paid subscriber on our Substack, because those are going, they're going to be behind the paywall after a while. All right, let's go to the next story. Biden poised to announce offshore drilling ban to appease the Green lobby. I'm talking to David Blackman on Tuesday on this one. He and I are going to do a deep dive on our podcast, and we're going to sit down and go over this. This is a double-barreled middle finger from the President of the United States. Biden has stuck it to the American people, and this is going to be a painful thing for Trump to get undone. President Joe Biden is reportedly preparing to restrict offshore oil and gas drilling in his final days of office, a move that would placate the environmentalist lobby and potentially obstruct President-elect Donald Trump's plan to unleash the energy sector. Here's where the Chevron deference does mean it's okay, but we have a lot of judges and Obama and Biden judges that can delay this forever. And drill baby drill is not drill baby drill. Drill baby drill is drill when fiscally responsible and when the courts allow. That is a huge difference on this. And I find it totally despicable that the Biden administration handlers are doing this, because we know that Biden is only trying to think of what his depends are full, or if he's having ice cream, because it is nothing to do with the government.
And to be clear, this is obviously only over federal land. You're talking about the coast of California and mainly Gulf of Mexico.
And
this
Alaska.
is what I find interesting, though, Stu. Here's this quote from the article. While many of the Biden administration's energy policies will be relatively easy to reverse, the reportedly forthcoming offshore drilling decree will be permanent and difficult to revoke because it is enabled by a law that permits presidents to protect federal waters from drilling without clearly allowing them to walk back prior designations. And that's all according to Bloomberg News. And so that's the part that just boggles my mind. It's easy to enact. The president has the authority to enact this law, but why then doesn't he have the authority, or the new president have the authority, to roll the decree back? That's what I don't understand.
I don't know, but I'm going to ask David Blackman, and David and I are going to cover this. So this is just huge. This is absolutely very much like this next story. New York's fracking ban ignores $1 trillion in gas reserves while green hysteria stifles the state economy. You can't buy stupid like Governor Hochul. Governor Hochul is absolutely leading New York down the Germany, UK, New Jersey, New York, and California fiscal failure. Governor Hochul, if you're listening to this podcast, you are more than welcome to come on and defend your your decision. New York fracking ban ignores $1 trillion in untapped natural gas reserves while politicized climate hysteria thwarts its economic growth. They're right on the edge of the Marcellus up there. And when you sit back and take a look, they've even imported from Russia. Trinidad and Tobago are the main sources in the Boston Harbor for natural gas coming in. They won't put in new pipelines up there. And if we got rid of the Jones Act, which I'm trying to get President Trump to act on, if we could do that, we could ship low-cost LNG in order to come around and drop it off in there. And, okay, they wouldn't have to drill, but you still have Governor Hochul getting rid of this, and she is absolutely choking. And I said that intentionally as a pun. She's choking the New York. If I was a oil and gas company, I would pull out of New York permanently. Have a great life, New York. Go away. Because when she signed the law that is the climate reparations bill last week, Michael, she is going after it huge.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I personally think this is, well, first off, there's not much oil in New York. So great. Banning fracking in New York is like banning
the natural
fracking
gas
in
out of the
Idaho.
Marcellus.
There's not much. There's a little bit of Marcellus there, but it's not much. More so if we were talking about Pennsylvania, but we know that's not going to happen. Okay. Now, there is some in, New York. I don't want to say there's none, but it's always been difficult to go get. So it's not like we're restricting stuff, restricting supply. Remember, this was this was signed in 2014 by Cuomo, who basically effectively had banned these new natural gas pipelines, which, we can get into. We can get into in a bit when we talk about our oil predictions for 2025. But it's what's funny is right next to what's funny is Pennsylvania sits next to New York. In Pennsylvania, the average price of electricity was 50% lower than in New York City. Why is that? Why is that, Stu?
Natural gas and coal. Oh.
Yep, absolutely.
And they have less pollution because the amount of natural gas pipelines.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think obviously reversing this fracking ban is good. Do I think it really matters when it all says and done? No. I think when you're talking about the offshore drilling ban that we covered in the last order, that is more precarious. Now, we'll talk about that as it comes into our 2025 goals or 2025 predictions, because I think there's some very interesting stuff there. Let's go ahead and jump over to the finance section. But before we do that, guys, we have to pay the bills. As always, thank you for checking us out here on the world's greatest website, www.energynewsbeat.com, the best place for all your energy and oil and gas news. Stu and the team do a tremendous job making sure that website stays up to speed. Everything you need to know to be the tip of the spear when it comes to the energy and the oil and gas business. You can check out the description below for all the links to the timestamps, links to the articles, and also our vaunted Substack. Guys, highly recommend going to theenergynewsbeat.substack.com and subscribing. If you do have it's the best way to support the show. If you are so inclined, sign up for a paid subscription. We launched our first 2025 fully paid for article. Stu wrote a really great article specifically on the Jones Act and talking a little bit about some of the stuff that needs to happen from that standpoint, where we're working on trying to get a interesting guest to come on and specifically talk about the Jones Act specifically. We've got 2 more articles in the works right now. One is a white paper co-authored by yours truly, myself, specifically talking about the critical minerals and some very interesting stuff that we actually rolled out 2 years ago. We're going to deep dive it a little bit more. Really what it's going to cover is, given all of these different energy transition scenarios, we know the IEA, the EIA, all of them have these different energy transition scenarios. By 2030, we need to have X number of energy mix, between coal, oil, natural gas, renewables, all this stuff. Well, given those different scenarios, we need to back into how much minerals we actually need. And I was part of a paper that actually broke that down and said, okay, given this clean energy transition scenario, we're going to need X number, of millions of pounds of aluminum, millions of pounds of all of these different critical minerals. So we're going to release that probably next week at some point, all of our paid Substack subscribers. Then following up on that, we've then taken that model and said, okay, let's apply a traditional capital asset pricing model to say, hey, are there certain minerals that are going to be in big demand, but that also have very little investment? And is there an arbitrage opportunity in this? So this is all going to be rolling out in the next couple weeks to our paid Substack subscribers. Highly recommend going and doing that. I'm really excited to start kicking out these white papers, Stu. A lot of stuff. I'm working on another white paper right now, why IRR is a scam. One of my favorite topics. Everyone gets all caught up in what's the IRR of the project without asking other critical questions, and we'll dive all into that in a bag of chips, guys. You can also check us out, obviously, on Spotify, YouTube. Go ahead and give us a subscribe there. We appreciate everybody who's done that. But let's go ahead, Stu, and jump over into finance section, guys. We'll run a quick run through of all of the indices. S&P 500 on Friday was actually up 1.26 percentage points to end a pretty down week, considering where things have gone, or not, maybe not a down week, but a down 2 weeks, really, since that beginning of Christmas here. NASDAQ was up 1.67 percentage points, which followed up a pretty big rebound over the last 3 days, having dropped tremendously. 2 and 10-year yields were up about 1 percentage points apiece. Bitcoin $98,000, so it's down a little bit from its $104,000 high, but kind of rebounded from a little bit of a lag from what we've seen. Brent or crude WTI was actually up about 1.1 percentage points on Friday, 73.69. It was actually above $74 for most of that day, slightly dropped below that 74 mark, but we've been on a little mini bull run here for the last couple weeks. Super interesting. I think there's some stuff to deduce there. Natural gas, on the brink of snowpocalypse as rolling through the Midwest. Guess what, Stu? Down 8 percentage points, which is pretty unbelievable.
Yeah, but it says 336 right now.
Yeah, so much for the $5 natural gas that everybody was predicting. But we will dive in a little bit to that more. Again, one of the reasons why oil has kind of popped a little bit, a little bit has to do with what's going on specifically in Europe with the colder weather. Because in Europe, they're not necessarily using natural gas. They're using heating oil, which is a derivative of crude oil, meaning demand throughout this section is going to go up. And yes, Texas, a lot of the West Coast uses natural gas infrastructure to heat their homes. The East Coast is a little bit different. I mean, you're talking about the Northeast part of the United States. It's a lot of heating oil, which is a derivative or a byproduct of oil, meaning that as it gets colder, we actually do see oil demand increase a little bit. We actually are seeing China drop a little bit, and basically there's hopes of further stimulus. We did see last week crude oil stockpiles did drop slightly over what analysts were expecting. So some of the supply side mixed with a little bit of the demand side, I think, has pushed prices up this week, and it's going to be interesting to see where they go from here. We touched briefly on natural gas. Natural gas, trade it if you're, if you've got the cojones to do it, because man, that's a tough market to call. You would have thought with where the weather is going this week, prices would have plopped again. A lot of the Northeast does use heating oil, which is a derivative of crude oil, so it's not quite mixed in there. I do think natural gas may be a little bit longer of a play, but I want to jump over in here to Stu, who signed optimism in the oil market as a new year begins, and our 2025 predictions. Obviously we've started the year out strong from an oil price perspective. If we go ahead and throw the U.S. oil production chart up here on the screen right here, you can kind of see where some of the forecasts are, both over time from 2020 all the way to 2024, and then where you see them might roll out in the future. So, first off, Stu, I want to give you a chance to jump in here and say, what's your biggest 2025 prediction for the oil markets in 25?
I think we're going to seriously head between that 80 and 85 mark, and I think people are telling me that I'm high, and I don't think so. I've got so many conversations going around. China's looking at putting in stimulus. If President Trump comes in and he gets the Republicans in line, and they actually start cutting the energy costs in half. You have Doug Burkham, you have Lee Zeldin, you have Chris Wright. You have that team that I'm reaching out to them to try to talk to them as well, and that's tough right now. But we're going to try to offer them solutions. If they can deliver cutting the energy costs in half. President Trump said, I want to cut the energy costs in half. That is a lot of natural gas. That's a lot of traveling. That's a lot of airline fuel being used. That is a lot of demand creation, but so goes the U.S., so goes the world. I think we're going to see an end to the Ukraine war. I think we're going to see some surviving. It's going to be tough, and I think the U.S. is going to be the one to survive. I think Germany and the UK, the jury's out.
I think to steelman your argument of higher oil prices, I go back to the offshore drilling ban. Let's say Biden does that. We go back to Article 4 here that Biden is posed to ban new offshore drilling. Obviously, in the oil and gas business, we're always fighting a decline curve. Yes. And I tell people this when they ask about, oh man, we're just going to drill, baby, drill, and all this new oil is going to come online. And I say, well, the question is what actually moves the needle from a United States oil supply standpoint?
New wells.
Well, it's not just new wells. I mean, let's take our good friend Ray Trevino and then the team over there at Pecos Country Operating. They're drilling tremendous wells, 30 barrels a day. That ain't moving the needle. Now, it's not just how much you, in an investment standpoint, it's not how much you produce, it's how much it costs to produce that oil. If you paid me $1 and I gave you 30 barrels of oil a day, you'd be making a killing. So it all matters. There's an investment standpoint. I'm just talking about from a supply standpoint, what moves the needle. 30 barrels of oil a day don't move the needle. 100 barrels a day don't move the needle. 1,000 barrel a day or horizontal well in the Permian doesn't move the needle. An offshore facility and an offshore drilling program does move the needle. And so if you do see this offshore drilling ban come into effect, you are really going to see the supply, you are going to see the future forecasted supply drop a little bit. And I think we do see $80, $85 oil. Now, I'm going to take slightly the opposite look. I think the 60 to 70 range is what we'll average for the year. I think we'll see spurts where we're in between 70 and 75. But I do think relative to the things we're seeing, I think we will see NordStream come back online. I think we're going to see Europe figure out their energy issues. I think we're going to, like you said, we're going to see an end to the war in Ukraine. And I do think what we're going to focus really on in America is the natural gas side. And my big prediction, and I don't want to say, 2025 may be a little bit too soon. It's probably a 2025 to 2027. But something that I've told anybody who asks me is I think there are two big plays that are coming up with this, let's say this next 4-year administration is one, I think you're going to see LNG export terminals get built like gangbusters because really, in my opinion, drill baby drill is code for deregulate. And nobody in Texas is not drilling wells because of regulation. Regulation only touches federal land. And as we see with the offshore drilling, it's tough to touch it. Now, Biden looks to do it, but if it was easy to do, he'd do it now. The only reason he hasn't done it now is because he knows it's easy to overturn. So he's trying to figure out a way to make sure it doesn't get overturned. So if it was really that simple stroke of a pen, he would have done it with the assumption that the stroke of a pen can't undo it. Now, where has regulation hurt? Well, it's hurt large, long-term capital projects like refineries, like LNG export facilities, which require numerous permits from 3-letter agencies that you haven't even heard of. You're talking NEPA, that's a 4-letter agency. You're talking the EPA, all these different organizations, and Form 28.9, and all of these different systems. I mean, you're talking 700 pages for one of these just reports. You got to go put headphones on a seal to make sure that we saw that picture from Elon and SpaceX. So what deregulation is going to do is be able to get those turned online faster because people would be able to do that. Now, what does that mean for pipelines? Because pipelines have... So I'm long LNG export terminals. I'd be long Woodside. Now, we don't give financial advice here. Remember, I am an idiot. I don't know what I'm talking about. But I would be long Woodside. I would be long companies building new LNG export facilities. And over the long term, I do think we see that appreciation be priced into natural gas markets. Now, on the other side, though, people who have owned physical pipelines, I would be short. Why is that? Regulation has caused a natural monopoly. If you've owned a pipeline for the last 5 years, the government has basically said, nobody else can enter your market. You have been the government has encircled you with a little bit of a regulation style monopoly, saying, no new pipelines can get built. So the value of already laid pipelines have gone through the roof. We're going to talk about it a little bit in our next article. Well, now with deregulation, I think you're going to see pipelines get built faster than they've ever get built because people see they have a 4-year window to get their permits in. People see they have a 4-year window to get these things built. And I think we're going to see an explosion of pipelines. And I think you're going to see pipeline companies hurt a little bit because their natural monopoly has been taken away. I go back to right before Christmas. What did EQT do? They spun out their midstream component and created a joint venture with Blackstone. Why did they do that? In my opinion, they saw the natural monopoly crumbling and said, we better monetize this asset at its highest valuation now when there's no competition so that and get our proceeds from it. They got about $3 billion at a $9 billion valuation. Because in 5 years, if we try to do this, it might be half the price. We might only get half the money. The valuation might be $4.5 billion. And so it's all about timing and monetizing at the right point. So I think that was a a canary in the coal mine per se of this is how midstream people who own physical midstreams are talking about it. It's going to be interesting to see. Now, obviously, the large pipeline companies have an in to build new pipelines. So I'm not saying that I think they're necessarily going to suffer tremendously, but I do think you're going to see a pullback in this natural monopoly of pipelines. Those are my two predictions. Do long LNG export terminals, short existing pipelines. That'd be an interesting spread trade right there. But I want to move over now into natural gas pipeline capacity ramping up in Texas. Oh, what a great segue from what I just talked about. Love this little publisher's note, Stu. This is great for the U.S. economy and the environment, as natural gas is critical to export and for electrical generation is often just flared as the pipeline capacity has been limited. Capturing stranded gas for Bitcoin mining or localized electricity has been beneficial, but pipelines are critical for long-term growth. And I love this part, positive environmental impact. So basically the summary is there is so much natural gas being stranded in the Permian Basin that new pipelines being built by these midstream companies is going to be critical in order to help increasing production. Because remember, when you produce oil, you get natural gas as a byproduct. There are some people that drill dry gas wells. We do that out in East Texas. You do that up in the Marcellus. But in the Permian Basin, natural gas sucks. You'd love no natural gas, but you do get some of it. And the other issue is we've been seeing these oil wells in the Permian get gassier and gassier as we move on. That's, part of lowering the bubble point, all that jazz. We don't need to get into some engineering stuff. So new pipelines are going to be critical. And I love this quote here. Natural gas egress out of the Permian has been a bottleneck as production growth has outpaced pipeline capacity additions. With natural gas production continuing to go, even more pipeline capacity will be needed out of the Permian. In second half 2024, two new pipelines and pipeline expansion projects were approved that will basically be online by 2026. So here we go. And we're starting to see new final investment decisions come around for all of these different pipelines. So again, guys, this is, if you go to the article here, you can see the new different pipelines, the existing pipelines, and you can also see the new pipelines approved, announced, and in production right now. So I think, again, new pipelines are going to be great for the business. But if you're looking at an industry that could possibly shrink a little bit, it probably is existing pipeline producers. What say you, Stu? I think you're on mute, my friend. We didn't hear anything you said.
I was coughing, so I put it on mute and I forgot. No, I just agree. And it's kind of funny. I said, I just agree with everything that you said, which is extremely rare.
Very, extremely, extremely rare. So, but
you did very good.
And that may not be good if we agree, because that means we're grouping.
I had a few things.
Okay. It's good. What else, Stu? Anything else people should be worried? What should people be worried about in 2025? I asked what should people be worried about for the week. Since it's our first show of the new year, what should people be worried about for 2025?
I'll tell you what, I'm excited about the new administration coming in. I think that you've got to keep your head on the shoulder. Just like look at New York City and the defunding of the police up there. We had so many accidents. You can't even ride the dang train, the subway up there. There is Tony Segura on X put out that he is calculated between geofencing that the Biden administration has let in 32.4 million illegal aliens into the country. How many of those are good people wanting a new life versus how many were cartel members? That is your guess. But when you sit back and take a look, keep your head on a swivel, know that God has this, and we are off to the races for a better year.
Yes, absolutely. Love that, guys. Well, with that, we will let you get out of here, start your week, and start your year off right for everybody coming back from vacation. We appreciate you guys checking us out here on the world's greatest podcast. For Stuart Turley, I'm Michael Tanner. We'll see you tomorrow, folks.